I know.
Hello, everybody. I'm super excited today. We have an amazing guest, and she's wearing the most amazing clothing right now. This is awesome. Okay, I honestly feel like this woman needs no introduction. If you are an Indigenous person, you do not know who this woman is, like you have been living under a rock. Which I guess, some of us do live under rocks. That's understandable. Pam has been a practicing lawyer for 23 years and is currently the professor and chair in Indigenous Governance at Ryerson University. She has university degrees in Native Studies and specialized in Indigenous and constitutional law. She was one of the spokespeople for the Idle No More movement, a huge part of our Canadian thread and fabric. She has numerous publications, including books Beyond Blood, Rethinking Indigenous Identity, Indigenous Nationhood, Empowering Grassroots Citizens, Warrior Life, Indigenous Resistance and Resurgence. I've added the links to those books in the comments, and I'm hoping that the links work. Yeah. If not, copy and paste, and you can find your way to get those books. She's also an avid podcaster, and I've linked her YouTube channel in the comments also. So please go to her page and subscribe to her channel because she has amazing guests. I also added my YouTube channel, Kwigwatsi Studio. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. It's harder to grow following on YouTube. We seem to get a lot more people on Facebook, and it's easy to, grow an audience there, but it really helps podcasters out if you subscribe to their channel. So please take a second and click on the link to do that. Pam has also received so many awards, we literally can't list them, like such a long list of amazing accomplishments, deserving of every one of them. So I just want to say that she's a leader, she's a visionary, and she's an influencer in the true sense of the word. And I'm so beyond thrilled to have her on the show today because I'm a huge fan. And I have to admit, like when Pam first started following the Totem Design House page and liking our stuff, I don't get excited about celebrities or nothing. But when Pam started liking our stuff, I was like, oh my God, look who's liking our stuff. So yeah, I'm a bit of a fangirl. I think I messaged you and was like, yeah, I'm a super fangirl, so I'm so happy you like our stuff. It's so funny. Anyways, welcome to the show. I'll hand it over to you to give your cultural welcome.
Oh, Kwe Ninda Louise Pamela Palmater. I'm from the sovereign Mi'kmaq Nation, an unceded Mi'kma'ki, which is the eastern part of Turtle Island. And my home community is Ugbaganjig, which is Eel River Bar First Nation. That's right at the tip of northern New Brunswick. We're a huge nation divided into a whole bunch of little First Nations, obviously. And that's where I'm from. I have a huge family. I have 8 sisters and 3 brothers, and all politically active, all, kind of like I am. We have crazy family gatherings, but it's awesome. And I just have to say, I am such a fan of your work and your stuff. So I was so excited when you reached out to talk to me and invite me to this podcast. Because as you can see, I'm wearing these earrings.
You're fully decked out.
And the necklace and the t-shirt. And I was like, how could I just wear them all at once? Because there's the baby Yodas and there's the other tees. But I was like, okay, this one's Yodas representing.
That's awesome. Oh, I'm super thrilled that you love Andy's work. And, we're going to send you something, but I'll save it for a surprise because, he was one of the designers of that, the Idle No More logo, right?
Yeah.
The main fist. And my partner, Andy, was the one who did that artwork.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's so iconic. I mean, it's literally the symbol of Idle No More.
It truly is. Yeah.
Nice.
So he also does the most iconic Every Child Matters logo also. So.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. That's awesome. Well, thank you. I mean, I love your work, and I love that, you blend the traditional with modern pop culture stuff that we all love. I mean, because I don't have to tell you, I mean, as soon as, The Mandalorian comes out and there's Baby Yoda, every Native person in the world, in Canada and the US, were like,
Yeah, he's our
adopting
child.
that baby Yoda and
child.
natifying them, and it was just like so awesome. So when this came out, I was like, yes, I'm just buying it all.
I kept sharing all the beadwork that came out of the baby Yodas, and it was just like, oh, our people are so talented.
I know. I love our people. They are legit the best.
Okay, so I'm going to dive right into some questions. I was going to say, okay, you are like a massive achiever. Like I was going to say overachiever, but sometimes that's like has a negative connotation. I mean this in the most positive sense. Like where does that come from? Does that come from being from a huge family? Like do you have to like work hard to stand out, or like where does your drive come from?
It could be deep-seated psychological issues like that. But, ultimately, ever since I was small, I've been identifying myself as the oldest of the 3 youngest. So, like, even though there's a bunch of us, I had a position of power. There's at least 2 more after me, 2 little girls. Honestly, I don't know what it is. Everyone in my family, because most of my brothers and sisters are older than me. And so they, I was a baby, they're teenagers or high school and, politically active and doing all this stuff. So I was just always on the go with them. If they were at a protest or a march, so was I. If they were at a community meeting, if they were doing politics, if they were, trying to figure out what was happening, if they're having strategy sessions, if they're in negotiation sessions with the government, I was literally there for all of that, even as a little girl. So the way my family is like, this is what it means to be a Mi'kmaq person, to contribute to your nation, to defend your nation, to assert your rights, to help assert the rights of other people who can't assert their rights. And so I mean, it wasn't even like, how some people, they grow up and then, oh, maybe we should volunteer once a month to do something. That our family was just always, you're just always doing work. You're always, and in addition to that, I have like so many sisters. In addition to all the politics, they were also always crafting or making baskets or beading or knitting or painting or drawing. It's like these women never sat down. I know I can't confess to be exactly like them because they're still like that. I mean, they're wicked amazing. And so that's just kind of the family that I was brought up in. So, there's work and then there's like, oh, look at all social media, podcasting and YouTubes and events and all that other stuff. And the thing about it is like, it's not really work. When you get to talk to people that you really like or you admire or you learn stuff from, there's also the fun part of it. And so I don't know, maybe I'm just addicted to our people, but the more I can do to help and to connect and to help other people connect and to lift other voices up. I mean, that's what my podcast is about. It's like, oh, if you're a land defender, I'll let me help you boost or amplify the call for help, the call for, solidarity and things like that. So yeah, I don't know where it comes from, but I think it's probably from my family who are just like always on the go doing things.
That's awesome. It's totally relatable to me too, because like I hardly ever get time off. And then I started doing this podcast on my Sunday and I was like, yeah, I've got a lot of work to do, but this is like way more fun than watching Netflix or whatever, like whatever people do on weekends when they have time off. And I'm like, no, I get to talk to cool people.
Yeah, I know. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's really fun. So, okay. So you teach at Ryerson. Like what specific courses do you teach there?
Well, so I teach undergrad courses, but I also teach graduate level courses. And I've also from time to time taught, like we have a partnership with the First Nations Technical Institute where you can get, certificates, courses, or a degree in, public administration through the First Nations Technical Institute in Tandanaga, just for First Nation students. So all of my courses have always been Indigenous focused. I mean, that's why they hired me back then, to bring more Indigenous courses, more Indigenous research, publications, all of that stuff. So the undergrad course that I teach quite a bit is called Indigenous Politics and Governance. So it's an introduction. It's like a first year course. It's an introduction to everything essentially, but it's not a history course. So start them out in colonization and genocide, and here's what's happened, and here's how it relates to what we're dealing with today, and then really trying to deal with the current issues. And then my graduate course is more, it's law and policy focused. So I don't have law students, but as a lawyer, the way I do it is I teach the law part, and then they work and do assignments and grapple with the policy implications of those laws. What do you do about that? A court might say X, Y, and Z, but how do you put that into policy to make sure that Indigenous rights are protected? So yeah, that's what I do. And I'm also the chair in Indigenous Governance. So that means I do a lot of public outreach, a lot of media, a lot of, academic presentations, community-based work, research, and the normal academic publications, that kind of stuff.
So what is the mix of your students? Is it mostly Indigenous students that you're teaching with, or is it a 50-50 split? Do you have a sense of?
Yeah, well, so keep in mind we're in Toronto, and so the vast majority of the students I have and have ever had since coming to Toronto are non-Indigenous students.
Mm-hmm.
There's always some Indigenous students in there, but Ryerson is so massive, and I'm in the Department of Politics, so not all the students would be attracted to politics. There's a lot in midwifery and early childhood education and social work and history and some of those other fields. So the students we do have are kind of spread out over a whole bunch of different areas, obviously. Engineering, nursing, all of that kind of stuff. But basically, it's mostly non-Indigenous students. So I have a real opportunity to get them before they're out in the workforce, causing harm, kind of get to them and give them a good grassroots. Now, what's different is when I haven't taught in the First Nation Technical Institute partnership in a while, but when I used to, I'm not coming in at the bottom and having to explain terminology and what's the Indian Act and all that stuff, which takes up so much time. They work in First Nations. They're primarily, administrators. So they already know that we get to grapple with the legal and policy issues more directly. And so, I kind of miss doing that. So hopefully the way the schedules work, I'll be able to do that again soon.
Well, it's amazing to be able to educate non-Indigenous people so that they have, like you said, they need that foundational understanding of who we are and the strife and all of the challenges we've experienced through colonization. So yeah, it's a really important role to do that form of education. So what drew you to law as an occupation? Where did the inspiration?
Oh my goodness. Well, that wasn't even my path. So, I can't say it's not my path because I took it. So technically it was a path, but it's not like I was thinking ever since I was a kid, I want to be a lawyer. I want to be a lawyer. In fact, once I graduated from high school, I took a year off because I thought I'm never going to school again. High school is terrible. I hated high school. I hated studying. I hated the whole concept of academics.
Me too.
I just wanted to be like my family members and, go protest and help negotiate and strategize and do what our nation needed to do. And I didn't want to go to university, but my family because they're older, they didn't have an opportunity to go to university. Some of them, a lot of them didn't graduate from high school. And so they were saying, you know what? All of these problems, we guarantee you that'll still be here if you go to university. So go to university, get a degree, get the credentials, and that opens up different doors and gives you access to places that maybe we don't have access to. And I did my Native Studies degree, and I thought, okay, that's good. But then I met this amazing guy. His name's Greg Nicholas. He's from Tobic First Nation in New Brunswick, and he was the first Native lawyer in New Brunswick. He ended up being the first Native judge in New Brunswick, and he later went on to become the first Native Governor General. And he was teaching Native people in the law when he was a judge. And he was just so compelling and so good and so smart and so experienced. And he was so encouraging. And he was and at the time I was giant pregnant with I think it was my second baby. Yeah. So he was like, you need to go to law school. We need more lawyers. You got to do this. And so between him and my family, I ended up going to law school. And
that's amazing.
It was just so good for that reason. Now law school was, but again, it's a tool that we can use for our own purposes.
Yeah. Well, your story just exemplifies the need that we have for role models and for people to say, if I can do it, you can do it.
Yeah.
And we need you. So that's really, really powerful. So you are a huge proponent of land back, and I'm curious to know what your thoughts are around nations signing modern day treaties. I know it's a big question.
Yeah,
I just want you to say, like, what are some obvious downsides? And if you think there are any, what are some potential benefits?
Well, for me, land back is so much bigger than technically land back. And so first and foremost, yes, it's land back, but it's everything else that goes with that. It's the resources back, it's the governance over that territory back, the respect of our right to be self-determining, the respect for our laws, the respect for the way we want to do things, the way we want to live. All of those things. And so at its core, it's basically a respect for our sovereignty. Now, as sovereign nations, and when I say sovereign nations, I mean like the larger nations. So I'm from the Mi'kmaq Nation versus like the tinier reserves, that each nation has the right to choose what it wants to do, whether it wants to govern exclusively, like totally separate from the Canadian state, jointly with the Canadian state as part of the Constitution, not. And so each nation has to make their own choice. My concerns around what I've seen at the negotiating tables are this obsession by Justice Canada and Canada, in fact, to demand certainty. They want a certainty and a finality of all issues. So one that's not really compatible with an ongoing relationship. There's no finality except for death, and that's not what we're advocating for. And there's certainly no certainty in anything in life, in any relationship. And so they need to see us more like other nation states, and understand that relationship changes and evolves, that it's uncertain, and sometimes it's tense, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. And that, this quest for certainty, finality, means that they force extinguishment, ceding, and surrendering, not just of lands and resources, but also giving up your Aboriginal rights to use a territory or to engage in a certain practice going forward. They've changed it a little bit at some of the negotiation tables to say you will agree to voluntarily not exercise your rights, but if you don't, you cede, surrender, and extinguish. So it's effectively the same thing. And I don't think we need to surrender anything in order for our rights to be just recognized, not granted, but recognized. And that's in line with what the United Nations has said, that this is about recognition, and that there was a UN study done on treaties that said very specifically that this obsession with ceding and surrendering is like a form of duress. You're not giving them any option. We're never going to recognize your rights unless you give up all your rights and then take what we have for you. And I think that's unfair to force us into that situation. That said, it's up to each nation what they want to do, so long as everybody has a legitimate say, that there's real involvement by the people.
Yeah, treaty is always such a divisive topic. As soon as you start talking about it, you have, both camps that are pretty like firm on both sides. And for me, it's like, I feel like from what I understand of them, and I'm by no means an expert, it feels like that a lot of it means you're giving up your Indigenous title to the land. And then, again, we're just talking about these postage stamp size parts of our territories, which hereditarily would have been just massive. Right? So to me, I find it problematic. And I think that there's so much misunderstanding around those issues that I think everyone, including myself, needs to be more educated on it.
Definitely important. And the thing is that at the end of the day, if a community goes through the process, if they all understand, if they're given all the information and they just decide, listen, hey, we want to be like X type of government, or we want to jointly govern a territory with the Canadian state, that's their sovereign right to make those kind of decisions. So my concern is just making sure everybody knows what's in the agreement, what the implications are for future generations, not just current generations. And that's, been a concern. We have to make sure that our people are informed about what's going on.
Yeah, it's tricky too, because if you think of a community voting and say 60% vote for and 40% vote against, then, then 40% of the people are losing a lot of their
Yes. And does that comply with traditional laws? Because we never had majority votes in our traditional laws. Yeah. We had, it varied across the different nations, but most of us had some form of consensus building. Consensus doesn't mean 100%. But it means you take the time that's required to bring everybody along with you. And so a 60-40 split to me is not legitimate when you're talking about ceding and surrendering or having a massive impact on your rights. But, if you had, more like 90%, 95%, and there was, a few holdouts, but you put the time in, even for those holdouts, to help them understand, answer their questions, modify, accommodate, make changes, whatever it is. The problem is the state doesn't like it when we take the time that's necessary to have these conversations. And maybe sometimes the conversation is not right now. We're not ready. 60-40, that's not good enough.
Yeah. The way it's established is so firm and not
colonial.
Yeah. So, okay, let's talk a little bit about the Indian Act, because again, this is another topic that is there's so many things.
Oh my goodness.
I was going to say, if Pam was to write the future for Indigenous people in Canada, would you abolish the Indian Act? Would you revise it? How would you move forward? Because it is oppressive legislation, but there is rights for us in there. So I'm how do we move forward?
I know, isn't it? So the Indian Act is this weird thing because it's racist, it's colonial, it's paternalistic, it controls our First Nations. It ignores our traditional governing powers, our traditional laws. It ignores our traditional territories. It's only focused on little tiny reserves. But that being said, we don't need to abolish the Indian Act to make the Indian Act irrelevant. And so much focus is put on abolish it or keep it, as if those are the only two choices in the world. When if you abolish the Indian Act tomorrow, people have to understand there's some real legit legal implications to that. It means, those lands are no longer federal lands, they're provincial lands. And if you think it's bad being under federal control, it would be a nightmare of epic proportions to be under any kind of provincial control in this country. And I'm sure I don't have to tell First Nations that the vast majority of the harms and the discrimination and the theft of our resources and all that all comes from the provinces. And so you have to think about it that way. And then there are things like there are taxation provisions that are similar to those that would have been found in the JT Treaty, which was supposed to have guaranteed our right to pass the Canada-US border and not pay taxes, not pay customs, not pay fines or levies and all of these things. These are all agreements that were made and they need to be protected. And the same with our reserve land, so that they can't just be bought and sold to a whole bunch of other people. But by focusing on that, everybody's in the pro or con camp and not figuring out, well, you know what if we focused on our laws and implementing UNDRIP, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which recognizes our governance, recognizes our laws, recognizes our territories, our right to control those territories, our right to make decisions on everything that happens on our territories, our right for women to be a part of our governments. If we focused on making sure that all of those basic human rights of Indigenous peoples were met, the Indian Act would just eventually be irrelevant. We would be restructuring, rebuilding. We would be, asserting our rights and setting up our own legal systems and our own laws. Then someday it'd be like, oh, the Indian Act? What was that? Oh, yeah, we forgot about that a long time ago. And that's the safer way to do it, because then the rights or whatever is in the Indian Act that is there is protected until such time as we're in a place where we have our own systems in place. And then the Indian Act's just irrelevant.
Well, that also brings me to just not that long ago, I read that only 9 of the UN rights of Indigenous people have been implemented in Canada. And I'm like, 9? How do we get to a better place there? What needs to happen to shake our governments up to start acting on these?
Well, okay. So the first step is getting Canada to a place where they recognize that when they finally did endorse the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, that the next step is formally implementing it in Canada. So
Mhm.
even if they hadn't passed Bill C-15, and there was people for it and against it because it's federal legislation, but at the end of the day, it was legislation that said, yes, UNDRIP is international law. Yes, it has applicability in Canadian law. And now Canada's mandated to change its laws and policies and practices to conform to UNDRIP. That's pretty significant. It's the same concept whenever Canada or any state in the world um, signs on to or ratifies a treaty, a declaration, a convention of any kind at the international level, the expectation is by the United Nations that they will then take steps to implement that into their own domestic law.
Yeah.
Canada signs a lot of treaties and conventions and agreements to, the Convention for the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the Convention to Eliminate Racial Discrimination, so on and so forth. But they're a little slow on the domestic implementation. So UNDRIP, you now have, it's officially adopted at the federal level. It's in BC. The BC adopted it. It may or may not be in other places, but now we have a process where the courts are going to be directed to UNDRIP as valid law applicable here in Canada. And that changes everything. It changes. No more duty to consult business. We're talking about free, prior, and informed consent. No more, tiny little reserves. We're talking traditional territory. So it changes the game substantially and it's consistent with what Indigenous people's rights are all over the world, including our rights. So there's such a huge opportunity here to use that as a vehicle for positive change. And you won't see anywhere in UNDRIP cede, surrender, or extinguish. You simply won't see it.
Mm-hmm. Exciting times coming up. So I'm a part of this TikTok accelerator program that's helping Indigenous content creators.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was selected as one of 30 across Canada. And so they're like walking us through the process of like how to be a content creator. Nice. But one of the things that keeps coming up in the sessions is this level of attack that a lot of us fair-skinned, white passing people are experiencing on this platform. And I mean, it happens everywhere, but TikTok is sort of like, like social media on hyperdrive. So everything that's great is like great, and everything that's bad is like extra bad.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, like, how have you learned to handle that level of attack? And I'm asking this specifically like for my cohort that are really like struggling with this issue of like being called out. And it's almost like Indigenous people don't want to hear from other Indigenous people that don't look like the stereotypical Indigenous person.
Yeah. Okay, so there's like several issues on that there. So one, I'm a strong believer because of 500 years of genocide and because of all of the fake Métis and the frauds and the pretendians and whatever you want to call them, especially here in Canada and the US, that we are now put in a position where we have to be accountable to one another as Indigenous peoples and to our communities and to the broader society. We shouldn't have to be. Yes, we can moan about that all we want, but at the end of the day, I have no problem giving an accountability statement to people and saying, first off, like I say it on my YouTube channel and everywhere else, I am from the Mi'kmaq Nation. Here is my First Nation. Yes, I'm a member of my First Nation, and that's my connection. For other people, it's going to be different kinds of connections. But I think it's important that we do hold ourselves to account because there's so many fakes. So that issue aside, I don't mind when people ask me. I hate it when they make, accusations like, oh, you're not Native, blah, blah. Just ask me. Here's the TikTok where I explained it all, or here's the YouTube where I'll answer your question directly. So there's that. Then on the thing about the hate we just get in general from people, And I know there's multiple ways of dealing with this. So some people, their whole TikTok platform is calling out racism and calling out hate and confronting it. And like, awesome. And I support them. There's so many amazing people doing that. I've taken the other approach where I don't engage with trolls or haters or racists at all. And here's why I don't. Because many of them have one follower or no follower. They don't have a name. They're just user 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If I do a video to counter something racist they said, I'm giving them access to all of my followers.
Yeah.
Why on earth would I bring them from no followers to all the people who are now going to engage? And the more you engage, you know how the algorithm works. The more you engage, even if it's like, oh, how dare you say that? You're just giving them more views and more views and more views. And then they can use that to build and build and build and build. And I think about that all the time because I don't want to give them a platform. And then the other thing is I don't want to hurt my brothers and sisters out there. They hear enough hatred. They hear enough racism. So when I see racist comments, I just delete them. Yeah, I know it hurts my algorithm. It's not going to show as many comments, but I would rather people be able to come to my TikTok or my Facebook or my YouTube or whatever and not see those comments. So I sacrifice the algorithm to not allow them to spew off and then get into fights with my followers. But that's just me. I know other people, that's their thing. That's actually the mission. And so they confront it and that's okay. It's just for me, I would rather just not give them the time of day.
I always just feel like I'm not here to change people's minds. And I'm not like, there's racist people out there that nothing I say, I could talk till I'm blue in the face. And it's not exactly anyone's ideas.
Yeah.
And so I can't feed the negative. Like I'm literally only on here to feed the positive. And if you don't see that, then that's fine. Like, just keep scrolling.
There's a reason there's a pink heart above your head right now. And it's like, because we're positivity and love. And so, yeah, that's great. And I support the people and all the different ways they do it.
Totally.
I'm totally cool with that. I don't think it's a bad thing. It's just for me where my energy is. Yeah. And I do stuff like one of my podcasts is a kids podcast. Yeah. And I know that some kids or parents follow me. And so I try to be really conscious of that kids right up to elders engage with some of my content. So for me, I would just rather it not be a platform for trolls.
Yeah. Yeah, I can say like from personal experience when I was younger, it used to make me feel a lot more insecure that I didn't look like the culture I felt like I belonged to, like there's that incongruency where it's like, it's a struggle. And I know so I'm related to people that look like from every end of the spectrum, right? Like from extremely Indigenous to like blonde hair, blue eyed. And I know how hard it is, psychologically hard on people who do not look like the culture they come from. And it's challenging. And it's also weird too, in terms of like opportunities that come your way. And sometimes you get, passed over for people that look more like what people think Indigenous people should look like. And I mean, there's definitely so many layers of that Indigenous identity and all of that. Like we can talk for hours on that, but
it's really hard. And it's hard for kids. It's one of the most common questions I get from the Native kids who listen to my podcast. I have blonde hair and blue eyes. And it's like, yeah, but are you part of the Mohawk Nation? You're a nation. You're not a blood quantum. You're not a race of people. That's how society's made us try to feel. But even the strongest people, we've still internalized that. I am still self-conscious when people are like, oh, really? You don't look 100% Native. What percentage are you? It's like, oh, so frustrating. Or my brothers and sisters, some of them are darker than me. Some of them are lighter than me. Some of them have like really dark eyes. Some have like blue eyes. And it's like, but we're all the same family and we're all the same people. And I have a soft spot for the place that we're at right now. There's a lot of fakes. There's a lot of fakes. And as you know, taking up the entertainment industry, awards, especially business, anywhere where money or fame can be involved, you've got a billion fakes. And so we're all struggling with how to assert ourselves and our authenticity, hold ourselves accountable. But,
Mhm.
it's certainly not deserved of being attacked or degraded. I mean, I get people making fun of me saying, "You can't be native. Look, you have blonde in
Yeah.
your front." And it's like, I do that at the hairdresser. Like, what difference would that make anyway? But anyway.
It's always something.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Um, so who are some of your heroes?
Oh my gosh, 8 billion heroes. So right off the top, my brothers and sisters, my family, because they are the reason I am who I am. They're
Aw,
the reason
that's
why I got
awesome.
over my insecurities. Kids making fun of you at school, and they just kept me strong. They're the reason they taught me how to fight and defend myself. If a teacher's teaching us, oh, Indians died off a long time ago, and there's no such thing as treaties. And I'm like, wait a
Oh my
second.
God.
What are you talking about? My brothers and sisters were there. They showed me the ropes. They showed me the politics. So obviously my family first and foremost. But from back home, people like Sandra Lovelace, who's now Senator Sandra Lovelace Nicholas, who took Canada all the way to the UN and won. And that meant that the Indian Act had to be changed,
Mm,
to stop discriminating against First Nation women and their kids.
yeah.
She's just so profound, like Graydon Nicholas, like I told you, the first lawyer, judge, governor general.
Yeah.
He's like wicked amazing. And, from back home. And of course, people like Ellen Gabriel. She was one of the most, in my mind, one of the most powerful women I had ever seen. And she spoke with a soft voice. And she was
Oh.
kind and loving and compassionate in the middle of the Canadian military, attacking Mohawks in their own territory. Here's
Mm,
this soft-spoken woman who just oozed power and love and compassion. She continues to be my hero, the way she just asserts, Native rights all the time. People like Canahos Manuel from Tiny House Warriors, and her whole family, like her mom and her sister, and her dad Art Manuel, rest in peace, and her grandfather George Manuel, like that whole family. Wow. I mean, they literally go toe to toe with prime ministers.
that's
And
amazing.
similarly, in the Wet'suwet'en Nation, the Gitumden clan and Unistoten clan and all the different clan members and clan leaders and the traditional leaders and the people on the ground, like the way that they've struggled, and their struggle's been so public, just torn apart. Is it traditional leader, elected leader? Is it this clan member, that clan member? And they're put under a microscope, but they hold themselves up with such dignity. It's always about love and compassion. It's all of these warriors. Schuyler Williams from 1492 Landback Lane, strong Mohawk, whole bunch of Haudenosaunee people there, strong. Again, they ooze love, compassion, and caring. You don't see any violence in any of them. They're peacefully
That's amazing.
defending their territory. And of course, all of the Mi'kmaq fishers who stood peacefully in the face of racism, violence, burning our, fish shacks, our boats just being shot at, like time and
Mhm.
time again. All of our warrior people on the ground are my heroes because they show how to defend themselves in love and compassion. And I just want to be like them someday.
Mhm. That is remarkable. It's so easy to go into fight mode and, on the attack because that's literally like it's like we're provoked to that point where it's like,
Yes. Yeah.
"Ah." But yeah, that definitely being on the loving, compassionate side of things is a challenge, but I think that that's what our ancestors have called for us to do. If you look at any of the elders, the revered elders in all of our communities were the
Yeah.
most graceful and most compassionate and giving. So yeah, that's exactly what I hope to emulate also
Yeah.
as I grow up.
Yeah. Yeah. I know, when we grow up.
So do you have any specific teachings that you have been taught by any elders that you carry with you, like that kind of have guided your life?
Yeah. So I've had the privilege, unlike some people that, in my Mi'kmaq nation, there's, lots of different elders, but we were like side by side with the Wolastoqey. It used to be known as the Maliseet Nation. And so my second home is like St. Mary's First Nation. I lived there for a time. I love everybody up there. I feel like they're all related to me. They all feel like family. And so there's a lot of elders there too, but even not elders, there's people who are engaged in like sweat lodges and doing ceremonies and volunteering in communities and helping to set up, kids groups and teen groups and things. Like there's so much good being done in our communities, and it's often not celebrated. And what I really, really like about it is this, what I've heard from elders is, I guess I could summarize it as, be the soft place to fall for your people. Don't be another person who is going to judge, belittle, point fingers, ignore, turn away, even for people that you can't be around because they're toxic or they're dangerous or there's some problems, with all different kinds of people. But, sometimes when people are in trauma, they're not safe to be around. Yeah. But you can still be the soft place to fall for people in those scenarios. Like, okay, well, I'm going to dedicate some of my time to make sure that we are working to decarcerate our people from prisons. Look at all of the people who are, in prison and they shouldn't be, and they're wrongfully there because of racism and discrimination and all those other things. So you can do that. You can help your community, make sure that everyone has food, everyone has a place to stay, those kinds of things, without picking out and saying, oh, but except you, because, you drink, or because you do drugs, or because you, I don't know, stole my boyfriend in high school or whatever, like there's lots of ways in which we've been impacted by colonization, traumatized. I don't know. The word trauma doesn't even cover it. For Indigenous peoples, it's trauma 1,000 times over. And sometimes it can be easy to judge and say, well, I dealt with my trauma. Why don't you deal with yours? But everybody is different. And the way I see it is, for every day that any of our people survive, that's a warrior. Whether they survived because they're soothing themselves with alcohol or drugs or some other addiction, it might not be right, it might not be healthy, but they found a way to survive. And who am I to judge? And I think that's probably one of the most profound things that I've heard different elders, like I heard elders out in BC when I've been out there saying the same thing, a similar way of like, be the soft place to fall. Doesn't mean you have to let people hurt you if they're not in a good space, but we have to always be taking actions on behalf of everybody and not judging, because they're going to get enough of that from the colonizer society that's already caused the trauma, and we don't need to re-traumatize them.
Totally. Do you have suggestions as to like what are some good practices that can help people through the trauma?
I wouldn't even start to pretend to be a counselor or a therapist or anything in any way. And our lives are all so different. I can't even say, well, if you're in my situation and do X, Y, and Z, because it's so different.
Well, like one thing that I know for sure is that the more people engage in the songs and dances and like whatever aspects that make them feel connected to their culture, that in and of itself is massively healing. And that's what I see time and time again, that, wow, even just singing our songs, even just picking up a drum, it has this impact that heals. It heals on every level, like the physical, the emotional, the spiritual. And so even just something as simple as picking up a drum. And and then it can be very simple, but every little step is actually very healing.
And so that's a really great example, because culture can just be soothing. Like for me, powwows, oh my gosh, I love powwows because it's just drumming and kids running around, and it's just happy. I've been fortunate to have been welcomed to powwows, to be part of powwows, to be engaged in ceremony and all of that other stuff. I know a lot of people who have been not welcome, purposely excluded from that, who've reached out to say their community or to the elders, I want to learn, I want to put in the work, and to have been shunned for lots of different reasons. And that can be a form of hurt too. Like even our elders have suffered trauma. So sometimes they can put that trauma out on other people without even knowing it. So I don't know. I don't like to tell people what to do, but if you've tried and been shunned, try again, try in different places. Just keep trying, because eventually you'll find that welcoming place. And I know what it feels like when people do say, oh, you're not a pipe carrier. Oh, well, you don't get to do X, Y, and Z, and use our culture in a judgy way. And
the gatekeepers
is intended.
I'm not a fan of the gatekeeping. I mean, I get that there's certain aspects of our culture that have rules, and that should be explained in a compassionate way.
Yes.
In a gentle way. It shouldn't be condemning and negative. There's many ways to teach, but
yes, there is.
Angry and harsh with people is not the best way.
Always remember the pink hearts.
Yeah.
Right? If we do it in a soft way, then we should be okay.
So I have a final question, and I always ask every guest this question, and it's because I'm hoping that these podcasts actually are inspiring to young Indigenous women. And so if you have a message that you could give to anyone who's struggling right now, a message of hope, advice, like whatever it might be, if you could share, that would be great.
Oh my gosh, there have been so many times in my life when I've struggled, and in lots of different ways, and other people do in all different ways. My message to young people is, it's okay if you don't know what your path is right now. It's okay if you're not have 1 million followers on some social media account. It doesn't matter if you're not the most popular person. It doesn't matter if you don't know your culture. It doesn't matter if you don't know your language. It doesn't matter if all the ways in which all of this has impacted you, because that's not your fault. You have no responsibility for that. That's what's been imposed on our people, and we carry that forward. So we've got a lot of luggage to carry. It's okay. What we need you to do is be healthy. Focus on your mind, body, and spirit, whatever that takes to get you through to the next day. Because every day that you survive, every day that you work towards your health, you are one more warrior we can count on in the future. Don't worry about, well, I wouldn't know what to do, and I don't know what my plate. All of that comes in time. But we just need you to hold on one more day, and then another day, and another day. And the path will come before you, because I had no idea what my path was going to be. If someone had said, oh, you're going to do X, Y, and Z, I would have said, no, I'm not doing that. I hate school. But it's just about, okay, I'm just going to focus on me today. I can't advocate for anyone else. Today, I need to get through today. And then tomorrow, we'll see what tomorrow brings. And ultimately, the path will just be created before you, and then you'll be doing what you were meant to do. And it just kind of happens naturally. Don't worry about forcing it. Like, we're here, and we're here for you. Like, everybody's here for you. Even if you don't see us, even if you don't know us, even if you can't reach out and touch us, know that we are all working towards bringing all of our people home, all of our people back in our nations, and all of our people safe and strong and healthy again.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like nobody ever feels ready. Like, you take the step, even though you don't feel ready, but as you take the steps, you get ready.
Yeah.
You're ready, just waiting.
You want to hear something funny? When I went to go and do my motorcycle course, I was terrified. I was terrified. Like beyond terror, as if I was swimming with great white sharks. Every time they said, okay, the next exercise is going to be, we're going to do a figure 8, and we're going to do it at 15 kilometers an hour. I'm in my helmet crying, because I'm like, I can't do this. I'm terrified. I'm going to fall. I'm going to hurt myself. It's going to be embarrassing. I can't believe it. And I would do it. And it was like, I can't believe I did it. And then the next time they would say, okay, now we're going to do the figure 8. and a big circle and an emergency stop. And in my helmet, I would literally cry. I had such profound feelings of, what am I doing here? I can't do this. This is never going to work. And you know what I realized? It's okay to cry, and it's okay to be scared, and but you can still do it.
Yeah.
And so I did it. My whole test that I was doing, my motorcycle test, when you finish at the end, I cried the whole way through. And the instructors are like, are you okay? And I was like, oh yeah, I'm just nervous. They're like, are you sure you're okay? You're not hurt? I'm like, no, I'm okay. But it's sometimes when you try to suppress all that and try to say, well, if I'm scared, clearly I can't do it.
Yeah.
You're going to be scared. You're going to be emotional. And, don't worry about all that stuff. Just do what you want to do. And ultimately, you'll probably be okay.
One of my all-time favorite sayings of all time is feel the fear, but do it anyways.
Yeah.
And that's exactly it. Because honestly, like fear, the actual border between fear and excitement is very thin. So you can just look at it that way and just be like, I'm scared, but it's kind of exciting because I'm just going to go for it.
Yeah.
And the more times you do that and the more times you step up and challenge yourself, the more you realize you're kind of like, you can do it. And then you start to feel the sense of like invincibility of like, hey, this is actually, I can actually do this, and I'm going to keep stretching myself and challenging myself.
Yeah. And you might not be successful the first time around. The first time I had to write my test, I failed. I was trying to hold in the tears. I was so nervous and stiff that they said, okay, go. I went straight forward. I didn't even go on the motorcycle course at all. I cried all the way home. I was just mortified. And I went back the next weekend and I did the test again. And I was like, okay, this time I'm just going to let myself cry. So I just bawled my eyes out the whole time, went and did my course, and I passed. And I was like, okay, so you can fail. You can fall down a whole bunch of times. Doesn't mean you're not successful.
Yeah.
It just means you keep trying, and success is when people keep trying.
Literally. That's all it is.
Yeah. So
like,
now I'm like,
failures deter you. You're like, no, I will figure this out.
Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. I'm so happy to have you on. It was a really awesome time, and I really have so much appreciation for who you are as a person, the leadership you share, all the knowledge you share. Thank you so much for who you are.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. This wasn't even like a podcast. This is just like, hey, I get to meet you for the first time, and let's talk about some cool things that are implying us. So, and to everybody out there, make sure you check out Totem House Design. Check out their YouTube website. I joined it today. And the only way we're going to get your subscribers up is if we get more subscribers. So we'll just make sure we get more subscribers on your channel.
We're going to be posting more like behind the scenes footage of how we make things and stuff like that.
Oh, cool.
That's why we kept it as the Kwigwatsi studio, because that's the name of our studio. Because so I'm in my office right now. Downstairs is our store and our production studio. And so we just want to share more of the background of like how Andy and I and my brother and I work together to create new things. And so we'll be sharing more background videos of some of the stuff that we do, because I think it's interesting that we're probably one of the only Indigenous owned companies that sort of like designs, produces, and sells all from one location. So
So let's do a video next time I go to BC and I get to check out your whole place.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Rolling, and we'll do a video and put it on your YouTube channel.
Yeah, that'll be awesome. Thank you so much for joining me, Pam.
Thanks. Have a good night.